Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Jatin Dharwani. I've done my MBBS from University College of Medical Sciences, Delhi, MD Psychiatry from Institute of Human Behavior and Allied Sciences, Delhi, and DM Addiction Psychiatry from AIIMS, Delhi. We're going to start with basics of addiction. And the very basic thing is the assessment and to know how to make a diagnosis and the issues in the nosology. So when we start with the assessment, we are going to go through a very comprehensive assessment because when a patient comes to you, maybe the patient has come to you because of your name, but what you want to do is to treat a patient. To treat a patient of addiction, addiction is a chronic illness. The patient has to retain with you. He should retain with you, he or she should retain with you. And for that to happen, there should be a strong rapport. And for that to happen, you need to do a comprehensive assessment. When we do a comprehensive assessment and we start from the history, we start with the socio-demographic profile. We ask for the name, age, sex, education, marital status, occupation, living condition, and the important thing is the distance of his home to the treatment center, because that will determine his long-term retention into the treatment. Then we go into the details of drug usage. For example, a patient uses 4 drugs: D1, D2, D3, D4. Let's say this is alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, and opioids. Then you have to mention for each and every drug what kind. For example, in alcohol, he is taking whiskey, that is IMFL, Indian made foreign liquor. For tobacco, he is taking smokeless tobacco. For cannabis, he is taking ganja. For opioids, he is taking heroin. Then you have to mention which route: oral, smoking, or inhalational route. Then you have to mention total duration: 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, 2 years. Then you have to mention usual dosage, which means he takes, like, let's say 2 pegs per day, 1 pouch per day, 2 joints per day, for 300 rupees per day. If you cannot quantify the amount, you can just mention how much he's spending on the same. After doing this, you have to mention what is the maximum dosage a person takes. For example, for alcohol, he takes 1 quarter per day. For smokeless tobacco, 3 pouches per day, and so on and so forth. When was the last usage, the last dosage? 2 days back, 3 days back, 4 days back, 5 years back. And with each substance, you have to mention whether he fulfills the criteria of dependence or not. So for a dependence criteria, 6 things have to be seen. Tolerance, which means the person is taking substance in an increasing amount over the period of time because he does not get the same amount of relief or the pleasure that he used to get earlier. So this is called tolerance. For example, the patient started with 2 pegs initially 5 years back, and now he takes 2 quarters per day to have the same effect. Second thing that you have to mention is the withdrawals. Withdrawals can be physical or psychological. When the person is not taking substance, for example, he has missed a day, if he faces anything, for example, with alcohol, he has tremors, then this is called withdrawals, or any sleep disturbances or any significant withdrawals. Then one has to ask for the craving. Craving means irresistible desire. For example, if a person is alcohol dependent, he has irresistible desire whenever the time is 8 p.m. or whenever he is with friends. He gets this desire, he cannot control himself. So the desire has to be irresistible. Then loss of control. Patient often thinks because of XYZ complications in his life, in his physical body or in his family, that he will control the amount of alcohol that he has been taking. So he thinks from now on I will take 2 pegs per day, or from now on I will take 3 days a week. But if he is unable to control the amount or the duration or the intensity of the substance, then he fulfills the 4th criteria, which is loss of control. Then comes the salience. Salience means that substance has become the most important part of his life. Earlier, he was engaged with his family, with his work, with his academics. But now he is cutting off time from all these things, and most of the time is spent either in acquiring the substance, in thinking about the substance, or in remaining under the effect of the substance. This is called salience. The last point is continued use despite harm. For example, we often see a person who has developed liver dysfunction and still he continues to use alcohol, or a person who has developed COPD. The respiratory doctor has clearly advised that smoking is not, he should not consume any kind of tobacco, but he still continues with the same. That means he fulfills the sixth criteria, that continued use despite harm. So out of these six, if a person fulfills 3 out of 6, then he's said to have dependence for that particular substance. Though we have taken a history in this format, but one has to take in a very serial order what started first, how it started, and how it progressed, how the tolerance came into effect, the withdrawal came into effect, the craving came into effect, and the rest of the dependent symptoms. So for all these things, we have to take the history of all the substances in a very comprehensive manner. Once we have taken the history of all the drugs, then we move on to the third step, when we take the history of the complications. So for each of the substance, either we can take the complications separately, or we can just mention in a single format, and we have to take 7 different kinds of complications. Physical. For example, the patient has been taking alcohol and tobacco, 2 substances, for last many years. And if with alcohol, he has developed liver-related complications. With tobacco, he has developed oral and lung-related complications. So you can just mention once that he has developed physical complications. No need to mention separately. Then comes the psychological complications. For example, depression, anxiety, insomnia, psychosis, memory problems, guilt, remorse, regret. Then the familial complications. If you ask a patient if he has had any complication, he will say, I've been taking alcohol for the last 10 years, no physical complication, no psychological complication, I do not have depression, anxiety, memory problems. But when you ask how has been his family relations after the start of his alcohol and after the alcohol has progressed, he will say that I have been neglecting family, neglecting my children, neglecting my wife, or when I take alcohol, I abuse them physically or verbally. So this is familial complications. Then comes the social complications. He will say that my neighbors do not respect me anymore. My work colleagues do not respect me anymore. They consider me an outcast. Then comes the financial complications. Even if the person or patient has not suffered physical, psychological, familial, or social complication, he will report that he has been suffering with financial complications, which means that he has spent a large amount of money to purchase his substance over the period of time. For example, even if he takes alcohol for 200 rupees per day, then 6,000 rupees per month, and 72,000 rupees per year. So that is the amount of losses that he has had. Or if he had to sold something, or if he is in debt, he has taken money to fund his substance. That also comes in the financial complication. Then comes the occupational complication. Maybe the person is not going to the work regularly, he's taking leaves. Even if he's going late. If he's not going late, he's not doing his work properly because he cannot sustain the attention required in the work. Then he's supposed to suffering from occupational complications. Then it can be legal complications. Driving under intoxication, getting caught by the police, engaging in physical brawl after intoxication. Maybe some FIR are there. Maybe some ongoing court cases are there. Maybe the person was incarcerated in the past. Maybe now he's in parole or he has completed his duration of incarceration. So legal complications. So these 7 things have to be physical, psychological, familial, social, financial, occupational, and legal. For students, we need to ask also about the academic complications. a 7th class student comes to you with behavioral addiction. Let's say he's spending a lot amount of time in the internet. Then he's not able to focus on his studies. Throughout the night, he's awake playing games, and next morning he's not going to school. And 6 months have passed that he has not gone to school. Now the school people are asking him to leave the school altogether. And then there is a school dropout, academic complications. Once we have taken the history of drugs, complication, we move to the high-risk behaviors. High-risk behaviors, particularly two things we need to ask. High-risk sexual behavior or injection behavior. Sexual means engaging in sexual activity under the effect of substance, engaging in sexual activity without protection, engaging with multiple sexual partners. So this happens very frequently, and that is called chemsex. More related with the club drugs, the drugs which are used in the clubs. So chemical sex. If a person has been using injection, usually happens in opioids, then if he's taking care of the hygiene or not, if he is using injection repeatedly, reusing the same needles and syringes and the same paraphernalia or not, if he is using that, then it is behavior. If he is sharing, maybe 2 or 3 people are sharing one syringe and needle, then it is a high risk practice. So sexual behavior will lead to multiple complications. We all know all the STIs, all HIV, pregnancies, and injection behavior will also lead to HIV, hepatitis infection, infective endocarditis, skin-related complications. So we need to ask about these high-risk behaviors, because if these are present in the ultimate management, we will teach the safe sexual practices, safe injection practices. Even if the injection has to be continued, it has to be taken in a very safe manner.